All right, welcome to our episode of Magnify the Middle. Today we're going to be talking about change management, and Elizabeth and I are joined by our friend Nate Witzman. He is a change management expert. So we're going to have our opening question in a second, but Nate, could you just tell us just maybe a little bit about kind of who you are and what you do and how you got started in change management?
Yeah, so little background, I spent about a decade in electrical distribution and started off as inside sales. And my degree is in marketing management. But when I started, I was there for about a year, and I felt like there's more that I can do. Mm-hmm. And so I started getting involved in side projects and, fixing things that were broken and wanted to take on new tasks. So that started my change management journey. So I ended up getting promoted into management. And then for 4 years, I actually ran customer experience for that company for North and South America. And so I turned what was kind of some of the side projects as developmental strategy into a career.
Cool.
And so I ended up going back to for my MBA from the University of Akron. So one of the best decisions I've ever made. Learned a lot from there. And also have my degree or my certification in Lean Six Sigma Green Belt.
Oh, cool.
Green Belt, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Cool, so watch out.
Yeah, exactly.
Watch out. Okay, cool. So I know you're going to be sharing some more insights with us a little bit later, but we always like to open with a question. And the first question is, and I'll put it to you, Elizabeth, first.
Okay.
What is the toughest change you ever had to do or go through?
All right.
Work-related.
The toughest change I ever had to go through wasn't necessarily the change itself that was tough. It was the fact that I wasn't at all trained in how to lead a team through change. So the situation was we were installing a new software, but it was a big software. It was a big operating system that was going to change the way the whole team was doing their day-to-day jobs. And I thought I was completely had it together. I was very organized. I knew who had strengths in what areas. And so I said to this team member, you're really good at this, so this is going to be your role. And you're really good at this is going to be your role. And I could see the finish line, and I was so excited about this change because their life was going to get monumentally better when we were at the finish line. Mm-hmm. But what I completely negated was the fact that getting there is very difficult. And when we were going through the transition and the software, I was very confused because the bottom kind of fell out on me.
What do you mean?
Well, I had one employee who was so stressed she went to the hospital, which I didn't see that coming at all because she was always my calm, cool, collected employee.
On the surface.
Yes. And then I had another employee who was my subject matter expert that I had as like the team lead on this whole project because she was the most knowledgeable, and she threatened to quit because it was so stressful. And I was shocked because that wasn't how I had it planned out.
Yeah.
So in hindsight, when I did my retrospect to figure out how did I miss this, oh, and by the way, the employees who were the ones I thought I was going to have the most anxiety from were the ones that ended up stepping up and carrying out through the steps. So I'm like, how I had to do a retrospect. How did everything happen completely opposite of what I suspected? Did some research, and I learned about like change IQ. Mm-hmm. So who are you during a change? What role do you take during a change? And then I realized, had I understood what their change readiness scores were, I could have reconfigured who did what on the team and really help them understand and be sympathetic towards them through the change, what it was going to be like and how was this going to affect them, as opposed to just assuming everyone was just as excited as I am about that finish line.
Yeah.
Wow. It's a good learning experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's usually how people start learning about change, right? Is by doing it and then going, oh no, right? That's
a giant failure.
Yeah. So when Jeff said expert, when he introduced me, I'm like, I don't know about expert, but I try. I do my best. Because you're always learning. There's always in every change. There's a learning.
I like the saying, "Fail is first attempt at learning."
First attempt at learning.
Yeah.
More encouraging that way.
Put that on the inspirational poster.
Right.
Right?
That's right.
Well, that's a good story to start us off, Elizabeth.
Yeah.
Nate, what about you?
I would say the hardest change, so when I took on the customer experience role at my last company, we had tried to implement a new Salesforce process in communicating between our warehouse, which was in another state, with our purchasing team in another state, and then also another sister company that was in another country.
So you had a lot of geographic diversity.
Yes, a ton of it. And everyone kind of operated a little differently. There was historical processes that no one really knew about that were just kind of special to that team. And if you weren't on the team, you just didn't know about them. So when I came on board, that was my number one priority. They said, we need to implement this ticketing system. And by the way, we haven't been able to get off the ground for about a year, and we need you to come in and do it. So I had to jump on a plane and go learn a bunch of those processes. I went down to our warehouse and got my hands dirty, and I was like, okay, have me pick the product, right? So in the middle of this huge warehouse, and they were probably laughing at me after I walked away, because here's this guy from corporate that just came walking in and
Right.
like, yeah, let me pick product. And I spent a couple hours with them picking product, and I probably embarrassed myself.
Yeah.
I told the manager, I was like, don't judge them for their accuracy today,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
that's on me.
Yeah.
But so that was one of the biggest challenges, was really slowing down and relating to people and understanding what they were going through in a day and what their current processes were, and trying to understand how it all tied together. Because I've always had my view coming from the sales background, but I had to learn their processes and how they operated to help tie in and implement it.
And you said there's an actual name for this, right? When you go, it's called Gemba Walk. Is that right?
Yeah,
Can you
Gemba
explain
Walk.
that a little bit? Because that was the first time I had heard that
It's called
term.
what?
Yeah.
Yeah, Gemba Walk.
Explain it. So it's basically like sitting in somebody else's shoes.
Yeah,
Understanding what they're doing.
So you actually walk through the entirety of the process. You sit down. That's one of the things with change management. You can make those assumptions, right? To your story earlier, you're right. Hey, oh yeah, I know who my expert is. I know who does this, right? And you just kind of jump in. Oh yeah, we're going to make the change. But the Gemba Walk is all designed around experiencing the process, noting it, really mapping out what it looks like to understand what specifically is going on.
Because it's tough to change it if you don't even know where that person's coming from to start.
Right, exactly. You have to have a well-established starting point.
Cool. All right. So my story, my change management story I'm going to go with is there's that quote, I think it's a Covey quote, that's change happens at the speed of trust. So it'd probably be a Valmark example. When I first came to Valmark, there was all these different systems, and really it was kind of clear that we needed to standardize. We had kind of the same data in a lot of different places, and it was a lot of inaccuracy with reporting. So it was consolidating the whole organization, all the different business units onto one platform. And it was really hard at first because everyone had their own ideas. They had their own little territories, their own turfdom that they had a lot of control over. And it was kind of difficult to convince people to change. So basically what I did was I kind of felt like a politician. I just did a bunch of small favors for everybody. But I think what it did is it just built up enough trust. And then once I had trust, then they were like, okay, well, I guess that'll work. Because they didn't feel like it was going to be taken away from them. They could still do it. So that was for me
Like you build in small victories.
little
from-
small
from the
victories.
beginning.
Yeah.
I always like to think of it as like a bank account, right? You have to build up your bank account before you make your withdrawal. And changing anything will make some really big withdrawals from that bank account. So yeah, you got to spend some time.
Put some deposits in there.
Yeah, exactly.
That's interesting because I think a lot of, especially new people, when they first come to an organization, they might be asked to change something, right? Maybe something's not working. That's why they were brought in, and their first could be initial reaction is just start changing things right away, or doing it the way they did it. They got success someplace else, and they don't necessarily understand culture, what people need, and how it might be a little bit different than maybe what they've done in the past.
Yeah, that's so. I just moved into a new role in the past year, and that was some of the advice that was given to me in stepping into the new role. I was at my last company for a decade, so making that switch, I'm stuck in my own processes and procedures and how I think things should run, and that was some of the best advice I got was, hey, just learn, just listen and learn what's going on. And there's also a great book, while we're talking about new people coming on, First 90 Days, and it really lays out a great plan for people that are coming in, because everyone has a great intention, especially at starting a new job, right? They're inspired, they're waking up in the morning, they're, they're not dragging, they don't need that much coffee because they're just inspired.
Yeah.
But the first 90 days helps give a really good platform on how to start off at a new company and what processes to follow and how to set yourself up for success, especially if you are being brought in for change.
Yeah.
So Nate, you told me there's a process you use called, and I'm not going to say it right, DMAIC?
Yeah.
DMAIC?
DMAIC. Yeah,
DMAIC.
the DMAIC model.
DMAIC model. Do you want to tell us a little bit about this DMAIC model that you use and kind of what the acronym stands for and all that?
Yeah, so I've got my little cheat sheet here. I brought a couple of things with me that I actually have hanging out by my desk as little reminders. Because it's one thing to read a book once or do an analysis, or do a training. Yeah, there it is. You can see the fold there. It goes over and stays on top of my on my bookshelf.
Oh, okay,
So,
gotcha. On the
yeah.
bookshelf, okay.
So
Now I know
yeah.
what to get you for a Christmas gift.
Exactly. Get that framed.
Get that framed. DMAIC. Okay.
Yeah. So, right. So we learn different tools, and we'll read a book once, and we'll say, "Great, I know it." Well, you forget it after a couple of months. So that's why I like hanging this stuff up to remind myself, hey, and I leave it hanging up in my face to remind it. So the DMAIC model comes from the Lean Six Sigma methodologies, and to me, it helps set up.
So what does it
change
stand for?
management.
What does it
Yeah.
even stand for?
So define, measure, analyze, improve, and control.
Okay.
So that's what it stands for. And there's several different points under each one. I could probably talk for an hour on what on the DMAIC model.
Yeah.
But I think one of the important parts to focus on in that is the beginning part, right? That define and measure part, and analyze. Because good change management starts with preparation and understanding. So you've got to define your mission. You've got to set out your team. You've got to know who your sponsor is for the change. Because you could be, a middle manager, but if a vice president or the CEO or someone in leadership, your influential people are not aligned with you, guess what? You're setting yourself up for failure.
Yeah.
Right? You might have a great idea, but if the main leaders and influencers are not aligned with you, it's not going to go anywhere.
It's not going to work.
Right? It's not going to work. You're going to have a fight, not only potentially from people below you, same level, but also above you. So setting that team charter is really important.
I think that is important because I think sometimes, maybe in smaller organizations, there's this idea of like skunk works. Is like, oh, I've got an extra hour at the end of my day. I think I can kind of do this and over time do it. And it's like, it's just not as effective as being a little bit more transparent, above board, like, hey, talking to your manager, getting other people involved, the buy-in to actually go through it, and then get some real resources to help make it happen.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's where you gain the voice of the customer, you could say, and that customer is your people, right? Who have to go through the change, and helping them understand, what do you think about this change? Is this potential? And gathering what their feedback and worries are up front. And then you get to the measure phase, right? Documenting the process and collecting some of that baseline data. That is important, like we just talked about. You have to understand the process before you change it and understand what goes on to be.
Because also you want to know, did it work? Was this a good idea or not?
Right.
Because otherwise you're just, it's hard to know if the change was worth it or if you would do something different again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that measurement, so you talked about earlier, where, this is going to make our jobs easier. That's one of the biggest pitfalls, and I've fallen into it too, of saying, this is going to make things easier. But the actual users of the process might not feel that way because they have established processes that mentally they can run through in their sleep. There's keystrokes on a keyboard and some of the systems that I use that I don't even think about. My brain just takes over. So you talk about that mental effort of the new change. It might mean more clicks. It might mean less time, but it could mean more clicks for someone.
Yeah.
So to understand what,
Well, and the tough part in the change management is there's trade-offs. So Elizabeth and I, right, we're doing a system. maybe I get a ton of benefit, maybe she gets more clicks.
Yep.
Right? She hates it because she got more clicks, and I'm over here saying I love it. But if we understand what that means for each other, you know what I mean? And for the organization as a whole.
That's such an important point, because I did get that feedback that this isn't faster because I didn't have to think about my previous process.
Yep.
And I'm like, but it's literally taking you a quarter of the time. But I didn't have to think about that.
Yeah, but it wasn't mental
Yeah.
time. It was maybe.
Yeah. Now, fast forward. Now, it's everybody understands it's lightning fast compared to what it was before. But you're totally right. I missed that entire point that it's going to take you a good 6 months for this to become muscle memory.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. And that's why the rate of change is important as well. Understanding what your rate of change is acceptable in the organization. How fast can you go to make sure people feel comfortable and can come along for the ride?
So you used a good phrase with me earlier. You called it change saturation.
Yeah.
Or pace of change. Do you want to maybe explain a little bit more detail to that? Because
Yeah.
I feel like sometimes Elizabeth and I get change saturation.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So if every single day something is changing, right, and it depends on the job. So say your job is extremely detail oriented and you have to be very focused on a process. If someone is coming and changing your process consistently, that's going to have a very heavy weight on you, because you've already got to be so detailed, you've got to follow the process so strictly that you can't really get into a rhythm, right? So the saturation is not just how much change the organization is going through. You also have to take a look at the job that people are doing and how it affects them, just the mental impact. But if your organization is going through a lot of changes and you want to set them up for one more, is that sponge already completely full? If it's not going to take on any more water, you're going to run into issues, and you need to expect that. And that's when you start running into employee burnout.
Yes.
People leave, and so once that sponge is full,
Yeah, that's interesting.
not gonna go anymore.
The sponge analogy. Elizabeth and I have
That is
used the
good, yeah.
surgery analogy. Like, how many surgeries can you have?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, because there are personality types, and we probably are one of those personality types where you're just constantly looking for improvement and you're constantly changing things for the better. But how do you assess whether we need a reprieve? We need to let our employees maybe do some maintenance on the last change before we implement the next one.
Mm-hmm.
How do you kind of watch for that and see if maybe as managers we might just be running too hard at this?
So you have to maintain a line of communication and understand how people want to communicate.
Mm-hmm.
You might have people that they will never speak up on a conference call. They will just drown, and they will burn out, and they won't say a thing, right?
Yeah.
And then you have some people that'll be very vocal in a group and speak up. So you have to understand your team dynamics and how people's past experiences with change, and just their overall personalities. And that's why staying close, and even if it's just I don't know about you guys, but I get this inkling sometimes. We're like, I need to call so and so, right? I need to call one of my reps. Just check in how they're doing. I have a hybrid team, so I have people all over the U.S. And sometimes I'm just like, I'm going to call them. And so pay attention to that instinct, but also give them platforms, whether it's in a group setting or individual, that they feel comfortable speaking up and talking about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's good.
yeah, so different avenues. So in a bigger meeting, some people might speak up. Otherwise, other people need that one-on-one direct ask, like, "Are you okay?"
Yeah,
Right.
you probably have to actually ask them the specific question.
Yeah,
That's-
and sometimes they'll give you the standard line. I'm fine. Really? Are you really okay? Well, not really.
Yeah, this is I noticed this right on the team call. I noticed your face kind of went, and okay, yeah, I know something's off. Come on, just what's going on? Walk me through it.
So as a manager, it's important to press in sometimes.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That's good.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So to kind of finish it out,
Yeah.
so the analyze phase of DMAIC, that's where you really identify the root cause. So change can happen in a couple of ways, right? Maybe you need to update something. Maybe you need to fix something, but you need to really analyze the root cause of why the change is happening and understand if there is something broken that you need to fix, that you're not just treating a symptom, you're actually treating the problem. A lot of people want to say, "Oh, this is taking so long. Okay, let's change it." Right? All right, we just need to flip this over. But to slow down,
they skip this step, is what you're saying.
Right.
Right. They're just like, oh, I got an idea. Let's do this.
yeah, they assume the root cause, and that is so dangerous because
Sounds like you have a story around that.
I probably have a few. Okay. Yeah. We won't get into
I won't
that.
put him on the
Yeah.
spot. I tried.
But yeah, because you never know. Right?
Yeah.
You can make those assumptions. You can drill in. You can find out. Okay, yeah, I think this is the root cause. You validate that. You check with the people that own the process, or just are active in the organization. Hey, this is what I'm seeing. I think this is the problem. What do you think? And then you have to sometimes just go with your best intuition, and it depends on how much time you have for the change. So then there's the improve and then control. I see a lot of companies, they spend all this time, great, we're going to change, and then they don't have a good control. So they implement the change, but then they have no follow-up to it.
Okay, so in my world, this looks like we put in some technology and we need some people to maybe enter data a little bit differently, but no one checks to see if the people are actually entering the data.
Yeah.
And so you build out this nice system, it's designed everything, and then maybe the manager doesn't follow up with people and say, hey, I noticed you haven't started using the new system, or you're doing it the old way, or why are you doing this other process? Because maybe we missed something, right? And maybe the new system doesn't work as expected, or there's some critical step we didn't analyze enough. And so the business needs to solve this problem, so they do it in a workaround or something. But that's where your control phase comes in to make sure everyone's still doing what's expected.
Right, exactly. And traditionally, if a change or something isn't working, then you need to go back and see, okay, are we actually controlling this correctly? Are we doing what we're supposed to, before having to say, oh, this failed, right? The change failed. Was it in your control? Was it in that step of follow-up?
Yeah, I once a different software implementation, and we had this great implementation team. So it actually went swimmingly. And I went to the national conference of the software, and all these other customers are mad. Implementation was terrible. I'm like, talk to me about that. Like, what happened? Why was it terrible? Well, we went live and everything broke and it was horrible. I'm like, well, didn't you run dual systems for a month ahead of time to make sure the new system matched the old system? No, we didn't have time for that. We just
we didn't have time on the front end.
yeah, we just went live and they didn't do it right and it wasn't programmed, and this happened to be payroll. So pretty big deal. Pretty big deal when it's wrong.
Yeah.
I'm like, you just went live and just hoped for the best.
Wing it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that brings me to another concept of the Lean Six Sigma is the failure modes effects analysis. Right? If a process fails, how big of an ouch is that going to be? And for payroll, right, that's a 10. I mean that disrupts everyone. So it's a broad pain, and it is deep too, because you're messing with people's money, and no one likes that.
No.
So.
Yeah, working here, Elizabeth and I are very familiar with messing with people's money.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I'll talk a little bit about that too, actually. It just popped in my head, the failure modes effects analysis. So you have multiple change initiatives that you want to roll out. Well, understanding what would happen if you did not implement the change and using a failure modes effects analysis helps you kind of prioritize and say, okay, this is the change I think we should go with. This one we can push off a little bit. And then also, too, if your organization is just saturated with change, which one do you prioritize to make sure it gets across the line? So that's always a good tool. It just helps you weigh out what's the impact and how much can it cost, and just understanding the whole wake that can occur.
Yeah.
Another thing you talked about, Nate, was this idea of delegating authority versus delegating tasks. I think a lot of times when people are doing a change and they're thinking about it, maybe we're quick to just, I need this done. Susie, Jimmy, can you just do X, Y, Z?
Right.
Yeah. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? Because I thought this is a really important concept to help people get through change.
So when you get asked to make a change, right, especially if it's from executive leadership, you feel this pressure, right? I've got to do this correctly. I have to do it correctly. I'm in charge of this. But what happens is that you might miss a lot of the detail, right? And you're just delegating and telling, hey, well, get this process done, right? Well, just do it, right? But delegating some of that authority and saying, okay, my success is in these people succeeding and the process succeeding. So taking a step back and looking at what things need to be done and delegating those out to the people on your team to say, hey, you have authority on this. So if it's, it could be something simple in a CRM saying, okay, team, we need templates, right? We need to communicate with our customers in a specific way. You communicate with them every single day. You see what works. You see what customers respond to. Update the templates, right? You guys have authority over the templates with some oversight, but you guys own it. So I think that's a pretty good example of saying, hey.
I think it could, to your point, like if you were the one at the top being responsible for the change, you might feel like you need to control everything. But the truth is that you actually get a better result by trying not to control everything,
right,
and to say, and that person actually steps up, whoever had that authority delegated to them, they will take even more responsibility. And it's more things than you can, as one human being, you can cognitively process.
They probably like having that buy-in too.
Yeah.
That ownership of that.
It's their process, right?
Yeah.
And you know what? A lot of the times is, you hear, well, you're making decisions for me. You don't do this every single day. And when it comes down to it, they're right. You don't do it every day. So give the authority of it to the people that do it every day and tell me, okay, how do you want to make this faster? What's going to work for you? And returning that down. And that takes a lot of trust in the organization as well, that you have to create that openness where those people feel like they can stick their neck out, possibly fail a little bit, but you've got to create the environment where people feel comfortable stepping into a spot like that.
I hear all the time, no one asked me. They just make these changes. No one asked me. It's what I do, but they didn't ask me. And it seems like that would really help negate that feeling.
Right. And you can delegate, you can delegate champions, solicit it out, kind of a democratic approach. There's different ways of leadership, right? In a time of change, if it needs to be done quickly, you might have to go authoritative style, but I always go back to that democratic style of change leadership in pushing that authority down, pushing the responsibility down, and making sure that they have ownership. So everything's going to result better, and everyone's going to be happier.
Yeah, that's smart.
It is. All right, I think we have time for one more topic.
All right.
And I'm going to say, what do you do when you get a Chad? What is a Chad?
Yeah, what's a Chad? Yeah.
A Chad is an antagonist. It is somebody that is against you. And I thought you had a really great quote around dealing with people that are maybe detractors from the projects, or as we jokingly call them, Chads.
I can't remember what my quote is.
This is your quote here.
Oh, yeah. So, when you have detractors like that.
Tell them what your quote is. It was so
Yeah,
good.
okay.
I didn't want to steal your thunder.
Yeah, no, you could have. It's okay.
Right.
So people aren't against you; they're for themselves. So when you're leading change, it's so easy to take it personally when someone goes, "I don't want to do this," or "This is stupid," or whatever variety of responses that you can get out of a detractor. And I always try to remind myself that they're not against me; they're for themselves. And the fact that they're speaking up and saying, hey, this isn't working for me is an excellent sign to tell me that I have missed something.
Yeah.
It's my red light to say, stop, slow down. What did I miss? What did I find?
I mean, do you always find that you miss something, or are there just some people that are never going to embrace change until you're a year past it?
Yeah, you're always going to have people. If you look at the product development stages, right, there's the early adopters where people are going to just, hey, first thing that's out, right? You're always going to have people that are resistant to change, and you're just going to have to pull them across the line, right? There's going to be people like that. But don't make the assumption that you understand why.
That's the key, right?
Don't just be like, oh, you're a detractor.
Don't dismiss them for just being negative.
So it could be a valid reason.
Oh, absolutely. You have, like we were talking about earlier, you might have someone that's detracting because they don't feel confident in their skill set. So they're just throwing on the brakes because they're like, oh man, no, I've got to hold on to this because, a little bit of I don't know if I can do this. That might be an individual conversation. Also, some people, I always see the mass training, right? Where, okay, get on the Zoom call and we're going to go ahead and share this training. Everyone better absorb it.
Yeah.
We're going to walk away and you're going to start doing this process. But your detractor might be like, I didn't pick up any of that. And
Or I don't even do anything they talked about. That didn't cover my job at all.
right.
Yeah.
And that's where you got to zoom in and really interrogate that and say, okay, why are they detracting? So it could be because there's the ADKAR model from Prosky Change Management that I like. So it could be their awareness, their desire, their knowledge. So there's a couple in there, but you just got to step back and interrogate exactly why they're resisting to understand. Most of the time, people are okay with it, but they just need extra help, maybe one-to-ones, or they might just want to be heard and they don't feel like they can do it in a large setting.
When I talked to my stressed out employee in my earlier example to say, hey, let's talk about this. Why are we so stressed out? Why are we looking at quitting over this? That's what I learned is she knew her process for 15 years. Mm-hmm. And I was changing it, and she was scared that she wasn't going to be able to keep up with the new software. And here I was like, you're going to be an expert because you're so good at it today. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And just reassuring her that, hey, you're not doing this by yourself. You're not alone. We're all learning this together, and we all have our sleeves rolled up. We're all processing together. Every level that's involved in this, we're all doing this together. So you're not going to have to figure out anything on your own. We're not going to leave you high and dry and just hope for the best. And that's all. It's all it took. It's all she needed. Just that reassurance.
And that's one of those things, right? She wasn't against you. She was just for herself, and she's being protective.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I always find it's interesting that you hire people for certain personality traits to be in certain roles, right? And if you have a very process-oriented job, well, those people, you should expect that they're going to push back when a process changes because they're so dedicated to their process. But that's why you hired them, right? That's a sign of a good, employee that, hey, I'm going to follow a process. Great, that's why you brought them in there. So don't get mad when they're pushing back on a process change. They're loyal to that process.
Yeah, yeah, it is true because you do take it personally. Mm-hmm. Why can't you see it the way I've casted this vision? What's wrong? Did I not explain it very well?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right. Yep.
Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Nate, thank you for coming in today. Today's Magnify the Middle, Change Management. I'm Jeff Moore, Elizabeth Kusenko. Stay safe.
Thank you.